Have you ever felt that your child has the remote control over your emotions? They press a button and suddenly you're yelling, you're frustrated, and you feel like, as one parent put it, a speck of dust in your own home. You've tried punishing, you've tried explaining your feelings, and yet the behavior is not changing, but it's actually escalating. Today we're diving in the $2 million question. Why do our kids seem to crave the power struggle between us? We're exploring the concept of false belonging, the idea that our children are getting a sense of connection with us in the wrong way. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how we can neutralize that power struggle and take the air out of it without losing your cool or your authority. This is the second part of our 3-part series with Hagit Zeltzer. Hagit is a master counselor of the Shefer approach and the translator of the book Trust Yourself and Trust Your Child by Dikla Yosefsberg. In this part of the interview, Hagit presents an accurate metaphor of an electrical socket that perfectly explains how, with our reaction, we fuel the power struggle with our children. And in the second part of the interview, we talk about the idea of false belonging, how we create it, and how we can start to create a good sense of belonging instead, one that will de-escalate the child's behavior. If you haven't yet seen the first part of this interview, I will link that in the show notes below so you can watch that directly after this episode. One of the things that is very powerful that the book talks about is the concept of belonging. We're creating a false sense of belonging to our children when we are reacting to them rather than leading them to us, mainly through power struggles. So can you explain that concept a little bit, on maybe break it down into concrete examples? How do I create a false sense of belonging when I react to my child when he's being rude, when he's disrespecting me, when he's yelling, or when he's any type of behavior that is not acceptable, any type of behavior that is not acceptable by me? How do I create that false sense of belonging when I decide to join him in the struggle, in the power struggle?
Okay, so once again, you're not creating any false sense of belonging. He's achieving a false sense of belonging. If in such a situation, these are not just words. These are basic concepts. It's not the $1 million question; it's a $2 million question. That one, because I don't think there are parents who haven't dealt with it one way or another. But so first, I just want to a few words regarding belonging. There are two different ways that a person can feel belonging, either by what he contributes to a group or to a society, or what he achieves or receives from them. The difference between the two is that the first one is up to him, what he will do if he to feel that he is part of the group, and the other is dependent on what he receives from the group. So the difference is that in the former, when he gives to the group or does things like the group, doesn't necessarily contributes to the group, just acting like them, like if everyone's playing football, you're playing football, and you're not trying to dance in the middle of the football field, and then you're part of the group. And on the other hand, if you are always waiting to receive something to feel that you belong, meaning you are, for instance, waiting for attention, waiting for constant validation for your behavior, you're not sure of yourself, then you will only feel belonging when you receive something from other people, and it doesn't depend on you. That's very it doesn't give the person the strength and the power to be independent and to be able to take responsibility. Now, a child, take this to a situation where a child is by essence, it needs to belong. It's existential. Human beings always need belonging. A child, from the minute he's born and has been disconnected from his mother, continues to strive and crave a connection. Now, of course, it's not a physical connection anymore. It's an energetic connection. It's always there. It's always in one way or another. And belonging. Now, it's that feeling of belonging and connection. It goes together, belonging / connection. When a child behaves in the family like the whole family, everybody's eating, he eats with them. He's part of the family. Now, the child who sits down at the table finally comes to sit down at the table and starts, I don't want this, and I don't want this, and I don't want this. He gets a lot of attention. He gets a lot of action around how he's behaving. And it would seem that he's getting a feeling of belonging, but that's a mistaken feeling of belonging. It's always dependent on what he's receiving from other people. It could be positive, like, oh, what could we do for you? What could we offer you? It could also be negative, where, like, just eat like everybody else, and why can't you eat your food or whatever. Now, that's not a power struggle. That's more or less attention getting way of getting a feeling of belonging. And what's usually more prominent is the power struggles, where a child will behave a certain way and he will get a reaction from the parent. If it's being not behaving properly, being rude, being naughty, or whatever it is, and very often elicits anger, being yelled at, being punished. So he's gotten a reaction from the parent, and he's gotten his connection. Great. Except that it's, once again, this is a mistaken connection. It drives the parent crazy, and it's not a connection that is something that's it's not something that gives the child the true feeling of belonging. Mistake. It's not a real connection. A child who's being yelled at has a false sense of belonging. It's not the essential belonging that connects the child to the parent in the way that we would like the family to be. Now, if this happens in a child's with a child getting negative reactions, parent being angry, then I would say this, like, really very, very with a disclaimer. If the child is getting his false connection by the parent getting angry, then we assume that by the parent not getting angry, or reacting or yelling, he won't be achieving the false connection. That's 100% true. This is not easy for a parent to grasp, because he hasn't learned the entire approach of understanding the dynamics. What we do is explain the dynamics. What I can try to do here in a nutshell is explain one thing. The parent, I think any parent who has a child who is misbehaving, and he reacts all the time, can vouch for that it hasn't changed anything. Punishment hasn't changed anything. Getting angry hasn't changed anything. It hasn't changed anything. So what we say, you know what? At least save your energy. I call the Sheffer approach an energy saver. Parents waste so much energy. Now, by actually not reacting, not getting angry, a parent might say, "Oh, but he won't know it's the wrong thing." Come on. He knows it's the wrong thing. You've told him a million times, if you've told him one time. So don't worry. You don't have to take responsibility for saying it 100 times more. And more than that, the child will not be attaining a connection. He won't be getting that false, albeit false, but it's a connection. And because the need for a connection is so strong, is so existential. He has here an opportunity, because we believe a child will always be able to choose his behavior differently. We can't cause him to choose, we can't force him to choose, but we can enable him to choose by cooperation. That's belonging, as a belonging in the right sense, in the positive sense, as opposed to belonging in a power struggle or the false belonging. We use power struggle here as an example because it's probably the most prevalent. It's all over the place. There isn't one family doesn't have one child who doesn't have a power struggle situation. And by the way, power struggle doesn't necessarily mean yelling, rude, or annoying. It's just who has the power, who's big, who's the big guy here, and who's the little guy here. Now, the big guy by nature is the parent, the person who leads. By the child's behavior causing the parent to constantly react, even if it's a subtle kind of power struggle, he's leading the parent, and that's something that we want to enable change. We can only enable it by not cooperating with the child's behavior, meaning not reacting. It needs to be dealt with very accurately, but it's doable, and I can vouch for it myself with my own children, and thousands and thousands of parents who have done that, understanding that even from the first step, just save the energy, and then it's like the child says, "Hey, wait a minute! I keep pressing enter. It's not working. Internet shut down, and there's no battery or whatever it is." And then change is enabled, and sky's the limit, because we all know a child who has driven us crazy at a certain point and has acted differently at a different point. The child is capable of change, and very often we see this also in different situations, different environments. A child will behave a certain way at home, and in school he will not behave that way, or the opposite. So this just gives us an overview, a whole different outlook. Hey, you know what? I can rely on the child to behave differently. I don't have to buy the act, buy the performance, because it's performance at the end of the day when we get into this false belonging. But that's also a very wide concept that needs to be really analyzed properly.
The book talks about neutralizing. Can you explain, or can you walk us through a very practical, or maybe can you break down to us how does that actually look like? So let's say a child is being defiant, is being rude, is talking back to the parent. Let's take a scenario like that. What do you mean by not responding or not reacting? How does that look like?
Okay, that's thank you for that question, because it helps me bring something very clarify something. When we talk about not reacting in a power struggle, we don't necessarily talk about not reacting in a physical way. A power struggle is an energetic, emotional. It's a power struggle. It's where, as I said before, there's one person someone who is strong here and someone who is weak, someone who's big and someone who's small. Now, very often in a power struggle, I will hear parents describe, how do I know if it's a power struggle or an attention-getting false belonging? I ask the parent. The parent explains what he's feeling and what he's doing. If the feeling overrides the doing could be, I explain, I get angry, I yell, all the answers are possible, but that's a physical reaction. If there's an internal emotional reaction where the parent says, I feel like I am this small, I feel so overwhelmed, I feel so helpless, that's where I understand that we're talking about power struggle, and that's where that's where neutralizing comes in. Neutralizing is really a tremendous. It's an issue that needs to be worked on one-to-one and really understanding. First of all, what it is that the child is achieving. But just for an example, I'm saying this. We're talking about power. Imagine a socket. Electrical socket where you put in the plug. Now, it's power, right? Energetic electricity. Now, if the parent reacts in that emotion, feels that emotional feeling, then he's connecting the neutrons and the protons, if I remember correctly from my okay, he's getting that current. The current is going. The socket is in the plug. The plug is in the socket. Sorry, same thing. Now, it's a question of what the parent feels inside of him. He doesn't say a word. Did we ever notice that our children know what we're thinking or feeling without us saying a word?
Absolutely.
Of course. Right. So all this talking to our kids about our feelings is, sorry, overrated. We don't have to. They know exactly where we're at. If a parent feels like a speck of dust, I've heard this example from a parent. I feel like a speck of dust when the child starts behaving this way. I feel like I'm the worst parent in the world. I feel like I'm so helpless. That's when I help the parent understand that you have other children. Do you feel helpless with them? Are you the worst parent in the world with them? And that's when they understand that what they're feeling regarding this specific child and his behavior is something that the child has elicited from him. And he doesn't have to supply it anymore. And he doesn't have to feel helpless, and he doesn't have to feel like a speck of dust. If he wants to, he can react and say, this is not acceptable behavior. But he says this as a parent who has a spine, who has a backbone. Right. So when the parent understands that this specific child is eliciting that feeling, then we know that it's not me, it's him. He's got the false belonging. I'm doing my job. If there's anything that a parent is scared about, he's not doing his job right. But you look at the other kids, and very often also you see that the child can behave differently in different situations. These are two different ways to neutralize. You realize that it's all a performance, and understanding that makes really opens all options. When you don't buy the performance, the child isn't achieving that mistaken connection. The parent has pulled the plug. And from there, anything's possible. But like I said, this is it's very generally speaking here, because these things have to be very specifically worked with a parent, with each parent. You may have a certain behavior even in the family. A child will behave a certain way. Two children will behave the same way. One child, the parent will react in one way, and the same parent will react with it regarding the other child another way. Each child achieves something else. This is not DIY. It's not do it yourself. You can't. You need to have the guidance. Eventually, you can do it yourself, but you need to learn it and really absorb the concept. And first of all, stop thinking the child is behaving because so and so, and then understand what he's achieving for me. Understanding whether it's an attention-getting mechanism or a power struggle, and from there, take the next step and see how it works. And it works. I can vouch for it.
Yeah.
So can many parents.
This was the second part of our 3-part interview with Hagit Seltzer about the Sheffer approach. Let me know in the comments, when do you think that you give your child a false sense of belonging when you're joining their power struggle? I'll see you for the 3rd part soon.